So men, the big question I have for us today is this, gentlemen. Where have all the warriors gone? Where have not just the men, but all the men of God gone? And honestly, this has apparently been a challenge throughout history. But often, the men who should stand up and fight for what is right are busy playing video games or maybe even doing something else. In fact, we see a tragic verse in Exodus 22 and verse 30 when God made this statement. He said, I looked for a man among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. I looked for this type of man, God said, but what did God find? He said this. He said, I found none. He said, I just need one, just one, who would stand in the gap, who would fight, defend, and live righteously, and I found none. And that's a big statement. So the question is, where have all those guys gone? I might argue in the world today, where are all the really strong men of God gone? There are, of course, a lot of them there, but in our society, honestly, it may be trying to turn men into women. And I know I could probably be offending somebody right now, but the problem is that men just don't make good women. We just don't, you know. So I've been married to my wife for 31 years, to the love of my life. And in the early years of our marriage, we had some kind of a man-woman tension, because I might think I was doing something her way. You know, I would go and without being asked, I would put the dishes in the dishwasher and run it. And honestly, I would think that's being a pretty good husband. But what I didn't realize was that there's a wrong way to load the dishwasher. And then there's a woman's way to load the dishwasher, all right? And we got married, and she's like, hey, you didn't do it right. And I'm like, well, how can you do it wrong? I mean, they're in the dishwasher, right? You know, I mean, they're wet. I even put soap in it this time. And she'd say, no, you know, yeah, they've got to go this way, and you've got to put them this way, and you got to rinse them off and wash them first. And I'm like, well, I don't even understand. I mean, she would just look at me and she would say, you're such a man. And for years I took that as a compliment. I mean, I was like, well, thank you very much, because men, we're just that way. We're just simple. But man, I'm not telling you that you have to be, you know, some kind of big old burly man, some bodybuilder or some bearded lumberjack type of guy. But deep hardwired inside your soul is the desire to fight for something bigger than yourself. So let me give you two principles today that I hope every one of you will take note of. Now, gentlemen, with all of my heart, that every warrior needs a cause to fight for. So write this down. Every warrior has a cause to fight for. There's something that happens when we are called to something greater than ourselves. In Nehemiah, when he was rebuilding the walls and then his enemies came against him to distract and to destroy, he called all the people together and he said to them in chapter 4, verse 14, he did a rally cry and he said to them, don't be afraid of our enemies. He said to them, remember the Lord who is great and awesome. And here's what he said to do. He said, fight for your families and your sons and your daughters and your wives and your homes. Fight for something bigger than yourself. And here's what he said to do. He said, men, I'm not telling you that you got to be pumped up and strong and rugged, but I'm telling you that you need a cause to fight for. And I guarantee you that there were some of those men that there was something that just kind of came to life inside of them. And they would say, you know, yes, I will fight for those that I love. I will fight for my city, and I will fight for my children. I'm going to fight for my home. You know, it's kind of like the difference between movies. There's two kinds of movies. First of all, there's the chick flicks, and then there's real movies. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. And that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, I'm not against chick flicks. I kind of like The Notebook. I just want you to know that. I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know what you think about that, and I may have just lost a few points with some of you guys for my rugged side, but I kind of like The Notebook, but I also love Braveheart and Gladiator and 300. It makes me just kind of want to worship God in heaven. But there's something about Mel Gibson painting his face blue and riding on a horse and saying to his men, many of you will trade all of these days for just one day to come back and tell our enemies that they can take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. You know what? Man, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat and I'm just like, yes, if I could only be born back then, I would have painted my face blue and fought my brains out. You know what I mean? Because there's something inside of us that says, there's a cause to fight for. And gentlemen, I don't know what it would be for you right now, but for some of you, you better get in the fight. You better get in the battle for your marriage, because if you don't, you're not going to have a marriage. And you can do what most guys do and say, I just got tough and I walked away. Or you can do what a real man of God does and own up to your own sin and apologize and ask for forgiveness, or forgive if you've been wronged, and humble yourself and love your wife as Christ loved the church, and fight for your marriage. Some of you, it's your kids. Because while you were trying to be successful in your career, you may not have been successful in being a dad. And your kids may head in the wrong way. And don't you think it's time that you stood up for them and fought for them and brought them back to the place that they need to be? Man, I'll tell you, some of you also, maybe financially, maybe your boat is sinking and you better start bailing out and you say, I'm going to fight for this because I'm going to wisely manage what God has put into my hands. It's not going to be about me. We're going to be givers. We're going to be free. And you've got to fight for that. You've got to fight to do what is the right thing. And some of you, well, there may be an addiction that's been taking you down for years. And gentlemen, if you don't fight for purity, if you don't fight to overcome it, it's going to overtake you. See, you were created with a cause to fight for. In fact, I would say this, man. I would say until you find a cause for which you are willing to die, you will never truly live. You have a cause to fight for. The second thing is this. If you're taking notes, write this down. A warrior without a cause to fight for will find the wrong thing to fight against. A warrior without a cause to fight for will find the wrong thing to fight against. In fact, in verse 3 of Acts chapter 8, we see that Saul, who was called Paul, was called by God to fight for the church, but without understanding, he thought to destroy the church. And in fact, verse 3 says that Saul began to do just that, to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women, and he put them into prison. The problem with men is if we're not fighting the right things, then there's a fighting spirit in us. And we will fight against the wrong thing. We will fight against authority. We will fight against our boss. And sometimes we will be mad at ourselves and fight ourselves. And then we'll take it out on our wives and our children. We will even fight against those who are trying to help us. A warrior without a cause to fight for ends up fighting against the wrong thing. Now, take for example, Samson. In the Old Testament, there's a guy who was designed to fight for the freedom of his people, but he ended up fighting the wrong battle again and again. An incredibly strong man with a dangerously weak will. And we look at how he fights the wrong battles, wins the wrong battles, and ultimately, in the end, he finally gets it right. So illustrating that fact, that men, if you're not dead, then you're not done. See, God's not finished with you yet. Even though you may not be winning what matters most today, with the power of God, in a moment things can change and the warrior spirit within you can rise. And you can fight as a servant, and you can fight as a warrior, and you can fight with love, and you can fight with strength, because in you is the heart of one who wants to stand up for what is right, what is pure, and what is just. God has created you with a heart of a warrior. So we're going to stop this video right now, and your group leader is going to continue to ask you a few questions to help you to figure out which battle to fight and how to win it. God bless you.